right, everyone, we're gonna get ahead and get started now. All right, good afternoon. My name is Gabriella Amini, and I'm the district representative for Congressman DeSaulnier. I just want to welcome you all for joining us today here in Pleasant Hill at Valley View Middle School. I'm going to start a brief introduction and run of the show, and then I'll hand it off. We have a presentation that the Congressman will be sharing on the current updates from Washington, D.C., followed by a Q&A section. As you may have noticed when you walked in, everyone's seat has a question card that looks like this. Given the amount of people in attendance this afternoon, there's no way that we'll be able to get through every single question, but as long as you have your information written at the top here, we'll be sure to send everyone a response after the town hall today. I want to take a brief moment and also introduce my colleagues who helped put this town hall together today. We have Janessa Oriole, our district director. We have Ryan Thomas Brown, our deputy district director. We have Caroline Francois, our community relations director. We have Kaylee DeLand, our senior outreach coordinator. We have Brooke Wilson, our district scheduler. We have Alex Stone, our district caseworker. And then we have Nicholas Bonacera, our district intern. And I also want to thank and recognize all the elected officials that are here today. We have Ken Carlson, the District 4 County Supervisor. We have Matt Rinn, yes. We have Matt Rinn from the BART Board, District 1 Director. We have Joanne Durkee from the MGUSD School Board. We have Jill Ray, the Deputy Chief of Staff for the Office of Supervisor Candace Anderson. And last but not least, to introduce the Congressman, we have Zach Shess, the Mayor of Pleasant Hill. And I'll pass it along to Mayor Shess to just give a brief introduction for the Congressman.
Emphasis on brief. Thank you all very much for being here. I heard an expression this morning on the way over here that said that action absorbs anxiety, right? Action absorbs anxiety. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, first of all, I want to commend all of you for being here, because these are anxious times. And anxious, I mean, I'm feeling anxious. I'm a straight white male, okay? You imagine what people who aren't are feeling these days, right? And so I commend all you for being here, whether you're from Pleasant Hill or wherever you're from, for taking the time, taking that action for whatever. Hopefully it absorbs your anxiety, but I know that one person who's here today that's taken action that I'm very appreciative of is Congressman Mark DeSaulnier. So with that, on behalf of the city of Pleasant Hill and the residents, Congressman DeSaulnier.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for being here. Thanks, Gabby. This is her first time doing this as an MC, so yeah, she's great. This is distracting having the county supervisor right in front of me. We're old friends, so we like to tease each other. But I want to thank the mayor and for your introduction. The Mount Diablo School District, thank you for the hospitality, for providing the venue. The Pleasant Hill Police Department, let's give them a round of applause, please. Those are tough jobs, and I really appreciate the work they do. Acknowledge that it's hard to be a public safety officer when you're in an excellent organization, and we'll talk about that later. And Pleasant Hill is a very professional department, and that's because of leadership, and truly they've had a great city council for some period of time. Very pleasant to deal with, Ken. So we're going to go through this, as Gabby said. I've got a PowerPoint. For those of you who are frequent flyers, this is part of it. How many of you have been to our town halls before? There we go. You all get gold stars. That's all you get. And they're not actual. They're just sort of metaphorical. So we'll go through the PowerPoint. It's fairly dense because so much has been happening. So as you all know who have come before and those people who are listening, if I go quickly, it's available on our website and on our social media, so you can follow it that way, because I don't want to go through every detail. But it's there because I believe people need an explanation, and because of technology, you can go back and refer to it. So if I'm going a little fast, it's because I want to get to questions. I don't usually respond to my trolls, but for the trolls out there who say that we RSVP because we self-select the people who come in, we don't. We take it first come, first serve. And then the questions, we do the same thing. So we just basically get submitted, we do a little shuffle, and we pick them out randomly. And as Gabby said, because I have such a wonderful staff, they will respond to your questions. I'm very proud of the fact that we are one of 6 offices in the last 20 years that has been recognized by the Congressional Management Authority for excellent constituent services. And between the Senate and the House, we're one of only 6. So they work really hard. I used to be in the restaurant business, as some of you know, so being responsive is important. And, you know, if you disagree, that's okay. It's one of the things we want to talk about is you can be, what's happening right now, we're so binary in so many things as a species all over the world, and that's not how democracy is supposed to work. You can feel passionately, you can really feel strongly, conservative, liberal, whatever, but the point of democracy is to listen to one another. And H.L. Mencken had a great response to a letter once. Some person wrote in and said all the things she thought he was crazy about. He responded to her by, "Dear Madam, you may be right, H.L. Mencken." A bit of a mic drop is only he could do, but it's true. And I was asked at an event before this, the Lamarin Democratic Club, one of the questions was, have you ever changed your vote based on what citizens told you? And I said, absolutely. Because if you listen to people, you find that there is a reason why they have that perception, just like there is for all of us. So that's the essence of democracy. And it's frustrating right now for a variety of reasons that we're not having that civil but robust conversation that acknowledges you can have a different perspective. And for those of you who've been here, you know my story about Virginia Fox, who's a very conservative member from North Carolina. She's chair of the Rules Committee, very close to the president. She likes to introduce me to new members of the Education and Labor Committee, new Republican members. This is DeSaulnier. He's our favorite socialist from San Francisco. We've probably done this introduction like 24 times. I always say the same thing. Virginia, by your perspective, I'm a Trotskyite. So let's just listen to each other. Anyways, and she was also great friends with my predecessor, George Miller, so you can do it. Okay, so this is the first one. It's because of the environment right now, we have to say I'm this ranking member in the Ethics Committee, of which I'm very proud of. The leadership asked me to do that. I'll be chair when we're in the majority in January. So we have, just to differentiate, I mean, government is politics and vice versa, but we can't use public taxpayer dollars to campaign. So put that up right there. If you think that I'm not being political enough, it's partially because I'm trying to make sure that I adhere to the rules that I'm supposed to enforce. Next. And we do town halls also on the political side, much like Bernie does. We don't do as many, but then I can be more political. But I think it all works. So this is our current district. The 680 corridor you can see there really goes right through where the population is, 24 and 4. It's changed once since I've been in Congress. It used to be east-west. I used to have most of West County, Richmond, El Cerrito, San Pablo. This iteration is supposed to change once every 10 years. It's the controversy about what happened in Texas and what the Supreme Court's decided and what we just did with Prop 50. We should do it once every 10 years. It should be by an independent commission. I think there should be changes to our current one, but basically the change to our current redistricting commission, which I supported when I was in the legislature, is that I think the membership of the commission should be proportionate vis-a-vis the census and party representation. So right now it's 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and I think 4 others. And I would just make it sure that either a weighted vote based on whoever's the majority, based on the census. But it works. It's better than having the legislature do it because it's a vested self-interest, which we used to do. With Prop 50, the map is going to change, and we will lose Dublin. We'll go out into Castro Valley, which is to the left. And then it moves up for all of Martinez, Bay Point, and then I lose most of Antioch, but I still have Brentwood. But West County is still in a different district, which I actually think it was nice as a Contra Costan to keep it geographically consistent because it just reflects the geography of Contra Costa. Next. So in all levels of government, we go into committees. That's a lot where the work does. Some of it's because of seniority. A lot of it should be because of your background and your expertise and also what your constituents want. Not surprisingly, I'm on transportation. That's a big issue for us, right? I've been involved in transportation since I was on the city council. And I had the distinction of being the first freshman member of the legislature to ever be chair of the Transportation Commission when I was in the Assembly. So I spent a lot of time in that. And then education and labor, obviously very important issues for people in Contra Costa and Alameda as well. Congressman Miller was the ranking and the chair for years on the Education and Labor Committee. He was also similar leadership on the House Resources Committee. And then, as I said, the Ethics Committee. Ethics is the only committee in the House that has equal amount of majority and minority members, so there's 5 of us on each side. You don't hear a lot about us because we're basically like a civil grand jury, or criminal grand jury too, where all of our work is during the investigation part. You can't be public about it because you want to protect people's due process. So it's a lot of members don't like it because you don't get a lot of attention until something bad happens. And then you tend to get members angry with you if you actually enforce the ethics rules. Some of them, not most of them. And then some of the caucuses. One I'm particularly proud of is the Bipartisan Cancer Survivors Caucus. I founded that with a Republican colleague who unfortunately passed away from cancer. And we've done a lot of good work. So one of our fights right now is the president's budget wanted to cut $7 billion for the National Cancer Institute. We have been, Republicans and Democrats have been forceful in saying no. Taxpayers get, according to the Congressional Budget Office, for every dollar we spend on cancer research, we get $2.61 back. So for people like me who survived stage 4 cancer, it's really remarkable the genius of the National Institutes for Health and the National Cancer Institute. The UCSF is the 2nd largest recipient of NIH and NCIS recipients, and the John Muir, Kaiser, they all benefit from it. So I'm proud of that one. Next. This is our last year, so I've had more town halls than any other member of Congress by quite a bit. We've had 23 this year, and then reflective of what I said earlier, constituent response is important to us, and I think we're one of the best districts, Republican or Democrat, in the House of Representatives, and it's reflected in our recognition, but also just the pure numbers. When I started, Joe Crowley, the chair of the caucus who AOC defeated, came up to me on the floor after I'd been there about a year or two, and he goes, "How many town halls have you had?" And I told him, he said, "Don't tell the other members." You can be a little competitive, you know how humans are. So now I don't bother, I just tell them. I did this presentation on the floor thanking my district staff a couple weeks ago. Next. So the country's very split right now. And you can see it. We've got 3 vacancies. 2 of those are Republican leaning seats, although actually it's about one and one now, because with Prop 50, which California 1 is the district that used to be represented by a very dear friend, Doug LaMalfa, who died just a few weeks ago. We were in the Assembly and the Senate together, so we were sort of a comedy routine. I miss Doug. That district, though, under the maps on Prop 50 is going to be more like a Democratic district. So actually, it's 1-1. Sure, I'll try to speak more directly into the microphone. Is that better? Yeah, okay. Thank you for letting me know. And then you can see the Senate. So this midterm is really quite crucial for the country, and hopefully both parties will start collaborating more. Very hard with the current occupant of the White House, to tell you the truth, in my opinion. Next. So this is, you've been reading a lot about this. Most of the appropriations have been signed now. They were pretty bipartisan because the Republicans moved away from the president's budget. They're still not good, but better. And then the one that's remaining that will be back up that the Senate's trying to negotiate, given everything that's happened with Border Patrol and ICE, it's very controversial, as it should be. I wouldn't vote for the current iteration, and what I'm hearing I wouldn't vote for, because the Border Patrol basically has to be completely changed, which I say abolished. So having been... And having dealt with public safety organizations, Ken's a former Concord police officer. I knew him when he was a cadet, right? This makes me look really old, doesn't it? Supervisor, yes. But they're getting it, like in any organization, getting an organization that's high performing and has the right culture can be a challenge. The Border Patrol has been corrupted. If we passed what the president wanted, and that's still debatable, in the Border Patrol, it would be the fourth largest military budget in the world. So the United States, Russia, China, the fourth one is India. If we gave him what he wanted, the Border Patrol of the United States would be the fourth biggest military budget in the world. So why do we want that? And to me, that's very, very dangerous. We have immigration problems, which we're going to talk about, and why we have these immigration problems. So anyways, that's what we're waiting on. It gets tricky here because obviously we want to fund FEMA. We want to fund TSA. So those are sort of held hostage in these strategically, I think, but they are in the budget. So it's not like they move that around. But right now, this is what this is as a caucus, the Democrats are requiring in the House. So can't wear masks. Police officers don't wear masks. Body cameras, great innovation in the last 20 years, better for everybody. Ending roving patrols, and a particularly important one is you've got to get a judicial warrant. They can't just issue their own warrant to break into somebody's house. So all of these. Yeah. And for me, a couple other things. In order to change the culture, you have to change the hiring practice. So most of these folks couldn't get into the Pleasant Hill Police Department. They don't take psychological testing that we do in California for California post-certified law officers. It works. It makes it better for everybody. So accountability is important. They deliberately hired people who helped create this culture, and the people who hired them created the culture. I have a friend who was former chief police in Richmond, Chris Magnus, wonderful police chief, came from Fargo, North Dakota. Richmond had tons of problems. It was an East Coast city. They brought him in, he cleaned it up. He was sued by his command staff, but it changed the whole organization to be very high performing, saved the city of Richmond, the taxpayers, lots of money, and the crime rates went down. Well, we know this works when it's done right. So requiring that kind of change is going to be a challenge. President Biden hired him to be his border commissioner, so he was in charge. He came in to see me after 6 months because he's a friend, and I had supported him. He went to Tucson after Richmond, so he knew about the border. He cleaned that department up. He came in and he said, Mark, I can't stay. It's going to take generations to change this organization. So here's somebody who knew and had proven about how you run a public safety, and he said to me 5 years ago, it can't be changed without a lot of changes. So that's sort of the culture we're dealing with, and it's a real important thing that we do. And what happened in Minnesota never should have happened, period. All right, so the second bill is important. The big ugly bill, I refer to it as the President of the United States refers to it as something else. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, apparently. But it was just, I am the ranking member on the Health, Employment, Labor, and Pensions Committee. I've spent a lot of time in health in every levels of government. It was awful for healthcare in this country. We have one of the most dysfunctional healthcare systems of all the developed countries. In mental health, where I spend a lot of time, we're ranked 39th out of developed countries, dead last in how we spend the brilliant research that we have. So we're great on research, but deployment of it has been a real challenge for the United States. So I spent a lot of time on that. That is where the big ugly bill was particularly bad, because its cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, well, Medicaid and Medi-Cal in California is creating huge pressure on us here. And it's not just the county. I met with John Muir. They're going to, 40% of the patient mix at John Muir and more than that at Kaiser are Medi-Cal patients. Well, if you're not being reimbursed from the federal government, you're not going to get service. I mean, it's just, you're not going to be seen by a doctor quickly enough, and the doctors aren't going to be deploying this marvelous research we have. So where did that money go? It went to the largest transition of wealth in the history of the country, to the top 20%, but it's focused on the top 1%. So I have a poster that always gets it's a picture of Mr. Bezos, Mr. Musk, and Mr. Zuckerberg. It always gets a round of groans when I use it at town halls. There's nothing wrong with making money, but the concentration of this wealth is really bad. So if you read Thomas Piketty's work, which won the Pulitzer for, it's just history and human evolution. When there's a lot of concentration of power, people don't like it, and we shouldn't. We're supposed to be collaborating with one another. It's fine that you make money, but it's obscene right now. Okay, so I didn't pick these pictures. Oh, that's right up there with Musk, Zuckerberg, and Bezos. So this is the problem with Immigration and Border Patrol. This was deliberate. They have refused to work with us to pass meaningful immigration reform, to secure the border as best we can, and have a pathway to immigration and citizenship based on the country's needs for employment, for the commerce, and also based on what our legal obligations internationally and nationally. The gentleman there was Steve Bannon. If you read Miller, I'm sorry, Steve Bannon, those two actually. If you read John Boehner's autobiography, he describes this and why he left Congress, because the Freedom Caucus and these folks wouldn't work with somebody like him, who was a grown-up conservative Republican and was a great legislator and was one of George Miller's best friends as well. They both went back and forth on leadership on the Education Committee. So you don't have to believe me, you can read John Boehner's book. They've created this, and it's a historical pattern in the United States. So next. These are attempts at, these are bills, bipartisan bills that have been submitted. Started the year before I got there. Eight U.S. senators, it was called the Gang of Eight, 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, John McCain, the current Secretary of State on the Republican side, Schumer, Durbin on the Senate side, and it's a great bill. You come to this country, if you're here and you haven't gotten your documentation, you can get in and get it, but it's going to take you up to 20 years to get citizenship based on having employment, not committing crimes. And it's based on the country's needs for jobs. As we look around the room, demographics, we're getting older, we're having fewer kids. So that one, Boehner talks about that in his book. So that passed out of the Senate with like 70 votes, came over to the House. Mark, spacing his name, I served with him. He was Trump's chief of staff, Meadows. He was head of the Freedom Caucus. It's really a funny part of Boehner's book. He goes into the speaker's office. It's supposed to go to a vote, would have passed overwhelmingly. He gets down on his knees and starts crying and praying. This is Boehner telling the story, saying, please, Mr. Speaker, don't bring it. We don't want to vote for it. So they don't want immigration reform. Pete Aguilar, who's the chair of our caucus now, Will Hurd, a wonderful Republican, he's a former CIA director, we became friends. They had a bill, same thing, they killed it. And then the last one, I thought this was going to really affect the presidential election in a way. James Lankford's one of the most conservative members in the Congress. He worked on a bill, and if you remember, candidate Trump came out and it was going to pass both houses, similar to the ones I described. And he publicly said, I don't want this to pass. Now, if you read America's history, we've gone through this before. We're the biggest place in the world that tries to take people from very different geographical places and perceptions. So naturally, we've had friction over our time. But we work together because that's our strength. E pluribus unum, out of many ones, a national motto. They know this. There's a book called The Unguarded Gate. There's a wonderful history about Eastern Europe and how when Eastern Europeans were immigrating, largely Jewish, Polish people, Eastern Europeans, what the country did about that politically. It was awful. So we've had this problem again. To the United States' credit, nobody in human species has ever tried to do this on this scale, is bringing people together. And it works when we do it. But these folks don't want it to work, is my view, and they deliberately do this because it works politically. Next. Okay, these are community project funding. We changed the branding when we were in charge. They used to call earmarks. We got rid of them, Congress, for a long time because members of Congress were abusing them, and they were getting millions of dollars to give to Uncle Fred or their political friends. So we got rid of them. We reconstituted them when we were in the majority with President Biden, and they're very performance-driven. We can give you you can go to our website and see where ours have gone, but we've been very successful at this. And you can see some of the ones that we've gotten. And I just got the release from what we got through with the Republicans, so we've got a bunch more that will help, particularly public safety, but also I'm really proud of the things we've done with behavioral health. So we have a program in this county. Ken's been a great supporter. It's called Anywhere, Anytime. So if you're in distress with behavioral health issues, rather than calling 911, you call 411. Dispatchers have been trained in both places to find out what the problem is. You get 24 hours a day, a specialized unit, county employees will roll out to that, and then the police will back them up. The police love it. Every police chief signed on my bill that created $3 million for Contra Costa because it lets the police do what they're trained to and what they like to do, and they're engaging with the community, but you have the mental health people go first, and the behavioral health people, and usually they know the clients, so it's really worked well. I'm really proud of that. And we're really a national model, and a lot of the credit goes to the Board of Supervisors and county administrators, but also the cities. Next. We got to be getting towards the end. Don't, you sound like kids. I'm trying. This is the boss, by the way. I just do what she tells me to do. So healthcare, we're almost done. Healthcare is a real challenge, both as a consumer and as somebody who spent a lot of time on policy, and a former small business owner. Trying to get people healthcare in this country is a challenge, to say the least. So the Enhance, we put this in during COVID to help people get through, and we need to keep it going. So we did. That was bipartisan through a discharge petition, so we had to get Republicans to go down and sign a document. So a discharge petition is your way around leadership. It's a process, parliamentary process, where you write a bill, you submit it as what's called a discharge petition. If you ever watch C-SPAN and you see a bunch of members of the House in a conga line, they're waiting to go down and have their signature notarized at the desk. And then when you get to 218, it has to be on the floor within a statutory period of time. So Lisa Desjardins from the NewsHour, if you ever watch her, she's one of my favorites. She now calls me Mr. Discharge because I started one and now everybody's doing it. And I never wanted that to happen. It's not good for a normal legislative process. We should be collaborating. But this is really telling. So we have the most expensive healthcare system in the world with a lot of great things in it, and I'm here talking in front of you because the American healthcare system. If you remember, for those of you who followed, I fell, broke 4 ribs, got pneumonia, and my kids were told by the ICU doctors at George Washington University, it's called the Ronald Reagan Emergency Room. I teased them when I came out. I said, well, if I knew this was where Reagan went and it was named after him, I'm not sure I would have gone in, but they saved my life. So I was supposed to die. So I'm grateful for all that. However, it's wildly inefficient, and the rest of the world doesn't do this. They're much more efficient. So we actually, the chair of my committee, Rick Allen, a Republican from outside of Atlanta, we're starting a thing this week about let's look at the inefficiencies like pharmacy benefit managers. I have a bill that was part of appropriations that basically eliminate them in large part, which was bipartisan. So we're going to work on this, but it never should have been this way before. There are people who benefit from this inefficiency, and I don't know why Republicans and Democrats, and this is my conversation with Rick, is this is something we should work on together. Healthcare should be efficient in the United States. And we've got all these marvelous parts about it, but it's the people who take advantage of it that we allow them to that make it difficult. And it's a lot of insurance companies. No, it's not a lot of insurance companies. It's one in particular. Next. I know you're trying, Janessa. It's probably my fat head. Okay, so these are just bullets again. I won't go through each one, but these are things that are, for us, we just won't do. So you can see what those are on healthcare. Next. This is a presentation because this is the basic problem in our country right now. It's the concentration of wealth in Citizens United that the Supreme Court decided in a 5-4 vote that money equals free speech. So this is me on the House floor talking about this last week. I bring this up all the time. The inequality I talked to is directly correlated to campaign contributions. So before Citizens United, it was more transparent. It was still a problem, but it was all within your campaign. So you could go on as a constituent to the Federal Elections Commission. You could see where I raise money, and you could judge while you're going to vote on it. Citizens United said that as long as the campaign's not involved, you can spend as much money as you want, as long as you're not talking to the candidate outside of it. So in 2008, before Citizens United was passed, that's where there's no green, and that was $16 million. After it was passed, it just went up, where it's now almost $7 billion. I mean, what rational person would not understand that has a cause and effect on how people vote? They know that they can spend hundreds of millions of dollars, and if you've ever read Dark Money by Jane Mayer and her work, they intimidate members into going, well, if you don't agree with us, there's going to be an IE, it's called an independent expenditure. So I've talked to Republican members who have left, and I've said, why are you leaving? And he said, well, conservative Republican members. And they've said, if I disagree with one of these folks, they'll not only spend all this money, but I won't be able to go to the shopping store anymore. And you think of people in the Midwest, where for generations they know everybody, having TV ads. A suburban member from Philadelphia who's a wonderful member, retired, and I said, why are you retiring? He said, they'll spend everything they want because I disagreed with them on these three things. So that's the problem we have in this country. We have to change it. We have a bill on the Democratic side. It was H.R. 1 when we were in charge, authored by John Sarbanes from Maryland. He's now retired because he got frustrated trying to push this rock up the hill. But I was a co-sponsor, and it is very strategically done so there's more transparency, at least in these, so that you as voters can follow the money and see who's donating to these and see who they're supporting. So with that, I am going to stop and take questions. Gabby, am I going to give you the microphone back? Look at how pleasant she is.
All right. Thank you, Congressman. And now we're going to head into the Q&A section. Please raise your question card in the air if you have one filled out, and my colleagues will collect them. As I said earlier, there's definitely no way we'll be able to get through all of the questions today, but if you've included your name, email, address, any sort of contact information, we'll be sure to give a response back to you. All right, we're just gonna dive right into it. Our first question is from Robert, and his question is, what is your opinion of congressional Democratic leadership this term?
So those are really hard jobs. I think they're great, to tell you the truth. But they followed somebody who, in my opinion, I have a subjective opinion, who is one of the great legislators and leaders in the history of the country. Historians will say Henry Clay, Nancy Pelosi. She's really, whether you like her or not, and I love her, she's very good at what she does. Hakeem is going to be and is growing into it. I see he's a friend. I see it every day. Catherine Clark, the whip, and Pete Aguilar, who I'm going to see in a while in San Francisco at an event. They're all great. But, you know, how many people remember who replaced Willie Mays? You know, this is right. We just think, you know, oh, just go out and get Abraham Lincoln, but make him speak like Jack Kennedy. No, humans don't work like that. So they're great, but they're growing into the role. And I'll tell you one last thing about this is I've been in Congress for 11 years, thank you, starting my 12th. Of those 12 years, Democrats have only been in charge of the White House and both houses of Congress for 2. This is what the founders wanted. They wanted to diffuse power and have, as Madison wrote, ambition contradict ambition. But it's very frustrating when you're not working together and understanding that somebody in North Carolina doesn't see the country the way people do in the Bay Area. That doesn't change your principal position, but you have to listen and try to figure out how do you get the necessary votes to get things done. And that requires great legislative ability when you're dealing with 435 House members and 100 senators, present company excluded from this. But elected officials can have their own unique perception of themselves and again, present company accepted everybody. Self-awareness is not always a strength sometimes, and I'm guilty of this too. So to your question, take it from me, these are 3 remarkable, wonderful people, and they're getting better every day. But I just thought of that, by the way. Who remembers who took Willie Mays' place? You don't just replace people who are really gifted and talented at what they do. And I would say both Nancy and John Boehner, actually, for the short period of time there, they were really good at their legislative skills, naturally and learned.
All right, perfect. And our next question.
Nobody wants me to.
We'll separate from each other. Our next question is from Diane. Given the current breakdown in historical checks and balances and the terrifying precedents being set by Trump with total disregard for rule of law and treatment of U.S. citizens, immigrants, and allies, what can we do to prepare for the future presidents to contain this destructive and uncontrolled use of executive power?
That's a great question. You know, and I will be honest, I despair of thinking of 3 more years with this environment. I mean, I flew back Wednesday because they canceled votes Thursday. Thursday, they were going to have a vote to condemn the Clintons, and the Clintons agreed to go to the Oversight Committee, which I spent 8 years on, and the current leadership is beyond awful. So we have to get through this. I think the things we have to change is the courts take too long. We've got to get injunctions faster when it's obvious that his direction is unconstitutionally illegal. Due process is great, and I think part of that for me would just be on executive orders. We have legislation that says you have to at least get leadership of both houses to agree with it. And you can let Jamie Raskin, who's brilliant at this, he and I have talked about this. How do we get from a legal, constitutional, smart expert, how do we set a threshold? So if we ever get another president like this, and how do we do it before? How do we do a discharge petition that says, okay, we need 4 Republicans to come down and sign these so that and we're going to be close to that in the next few weeks. A lot of us are thinking about this, is because of our success with discharge petitions, with the Epstein file, with extending the tax credits. We had a series of bills that went through the Labor Committee that were awful. When they went to the floor, a group of 25 Republicans said, wait, we keep telling working people we care about them, and now you're going to take away all of these rights that they have, statutory rights. So they killed the bill on the floor, and the Speaker kept us there for 2.5 hours, and where I said to the former Speaker, I don't remember you ever bringing a bill to the floor and letting it sit here for 2.5 hours. You had already gotten everybody to go along before you brought it out in public. So we have to change. I mean, the checks and balances, somebody just wrote about this, I think it was in Atlantic, about We feel good about the fact that these institutions are holding up, but then we're terrified. It's sort of like Dickens, the best and the worst of times, is that somehow these institutions are holding up and the courts, even Trump appointees, are finding against him. But we can't take that for granted. And they're trying to wear us out. He's trying to wear us out, and his supporters. So there's no way to sugarcoat this, folks. I don't think since the Civil War this country's democracy has ever been at more risk. What Telsey, when I was flying back here, and Jared Huffman was sitting one seat over from me, who was a friend. We were in the legislature together, represents Marin, is the ranking member on resources. And I opened my phone, the front page of the New York Times has a story about the National Security Advisor and the FBI going in and seizing voting records from 2020 in the voter registration in Fulton County. That's outrageous. And I served with Telsey Gabbard. She shouldn't be in that position. The number of laws they broke doing that, and some judge gave them the warrant. So we have to go through all that. So the answer to your question is there has to be a big change on executive power. And to some degree, the Congress has let that happen because the founders expected the House to be the biggest relationship to the people and be most reflective and put the pressure in. That's why Article 1 says all the financial bills have to start in the House of Representatives. So if you read Madison and Jefferson and the Federalist, that was their idea. The House is the closest to the people. They should be in control. Well, we've ceded that power. And the majority basically does whatever he tells them to do, and Miller tells them to do. And Vogt. Mr. Vogt is charge of the Office of Management and Budget, and he's sort of the evil genius behind the financial stuff.
We have our next question from Christina. As a 30-year employee of the Head Start program and program director for the county's Community Action Program, I'm deeply concerned of the constant assault on the poor. Do you feel these programs still have bipartisan support?
They do, but they're afraid to show it. So Head Start's been a great program. Ken, the county's done a great job. The county is the largest provider of early education in the county. George Miller, myself, Sonny McPeak, we all really supported these Head Start programs. And that was before we learned how cognitive development in detail chemically works because of NIH funding. So they're great programs. You have talented kids who live in stressful environment. They get good education. Lo and behold, they go out and become remarkably productive human beings. So we know it works. And again, the rest of the world, developed worlds, look at us and goes, why don't you have free, affordable, universal, high quality childcare? Because the rest of the developed world, I talked to colleagues from other countries over the years, and besides healthcare, they're like, what are you doing with your future? You know, if you don't invest in kids, irrespective, especially when they live in stressful, poor environments, it's not going to work. So Head Start's been a remarkable program in spite of huge challenges, Ken, right? I mean, how do you pay people enough to do this work and get them the continuing education so they're really good as teachers? And they should be. This is the most valuable thing we have is our kids. So historically, it's been bipartisan with not completely bipartisan because the general attitude by a lot of my more rural colleagues is, well, what do we have to pay for it? I turned out fine. I'm like, well, first of all, you didn't turn out fine. I'm not a therapist, but doesn't take a therapist to tell you've got some issues. I do too. So to answer the question, it has been historically bipartisan, and Congressman Miller was a huge part of this. He was a big advocate as a senior member of the Education Committee. And again, as I say, this shouldn't be partisan. The research tells us, and people don't realize brain imaging and genetics, we know more about how this works in the last 60 years because of those two things and our investments in behavioral health and medical health than all the thousands of years before us. And all of that is happening exponentially, but we're not deploying that information to help people. So that keeps me up at night as well. But I will say here in this county, and not just because he's sitting here, but because I was part of it. Well, no, we've done a really good job, but it's still not enough.
All right, and we have our next question from Michelle. Healthcare is the most expensive because citizens are paying for immigrants who came against our laws. How do you plan to work for us who are citizens on getting the costs down?
Actually, that's not accurate. So we're happy to provide the research for you. So we can talk later, or you can go to our website. I think we've got this information on the website. You can disagree with the research, but that's not what research like the Congressional Budget Office tells us. And again, a lot of these folks are here because of the slide I told you. We need people to work here. We're not having kids like we used to. I see a lot of people who look like me, a lot of baby boomers. It's we see this from other developed countries too. Japan has a challenge with this. Having been to Japan multiple times, they're a great culture, but they don't have a lot of immigration. So the Chinese, they had too many kids, and now they're trying to get more. So when you say, this is one really important, folks, and this is another big challenge, how we get information. And the sophistication of the misinformation is growing exponentially. There's a series of books on this. One of my favorites is called The Chaos Machine by a New York Times reporter. And a lot of it happened here in the Bay Area, and then we lost control of it. So all this technology, the internet, Steve Jobs, brilliant. But private equity, in my view, has come in and run those companies largely now. So it's not about being creative. It's just about maximizing return on investment. Algorithms is the most targeted way to get your money and get your opinion. So these algorithms, that's why they want the data more and more, because they not only know where you live and what, sort of the tendencies are of where you live and your background, they know your chemistry up here, and they're learning it all the time. And there's great books out there. There's a book by Susan Lin, who's a neurological pediatrician at Harvard. She wrote Who's Minding Our Kids? Big Tech. Professor Lemke at Stanford wrote Dopamine Nation, remarkable book. So we're finding out more and more. So when you get information that says that, that's political consultants telling you what you know. They know you are predisposed because of the data they have to believe. And it may be right. We can have that conversation. There's some element of truth to that. But on the other hand, if we solved our immigration problems statutorily rather than having people deliberately divide us, we could have a rational conversation. And I'd get my progressive beliefs in that, but I have to balance that against Virginia Fox's beliefs to get the votes. So we're happy to share our information with that. And if you want to come and sit down with me, I'm happy to have a one-on-one with you to talk about why what you said, I believe, is incorrect. I'll tell you one just personal story. My grandparents were immigrants, mostly from Ireland and from French Canada. They came down to work in the mills in Lowell, Massachusetts during the Industrial Revolution. My dear departed mother, who was a huge influence on me, 100% Boston Irish, always complaining about when she grew up, there were signs in Boston saying job available, Irish need not apply. When she got older, when she's in the nursing home, God bless her, I'd go over and see her in San Francisco, and she'd complain about her caregivers who were not Irish. They were. So at one point I go, Mom, how is this different from your experience? And she grabbed my arm and she goes, that's different. So, sorry, Mom, I don't see it as being different. Sorry, Mom. She's going to kick my ass.
All right, and I think we have time for a couple more questions. We have a question from Mel. The Democrats in Congress seem to be very quiet when it comes to speaking out against Trump's policies and attempting to micromanage the country. Why is this? They need to be much more vocal in their pushback.
I agree. I absolutely agree. This is such an existential moment in this country's history. We have to be aggressive about it. We do have to be smart. So when you go to Ohio, you go to Western Pennsylvania, you go to 10 miles outside of Madison, Wisconsin, where out of 435 seats, right now about 35 are could go either way. So you also have to be smart about how we feel about it, but how you communicate that to people who have a different worldview, quite frankly, from most of us who live in a place like the Bay Area or Boston, D.C. I would point to a couple of colleagues. Marcy Kaptur, longest-serving woman in the history of the House of Representatives, has a tough seat in Ohio. She's great at this. She's just, if you watch her, Sherrod Brown, senator from Ohio, who unfortunately lost to a Trumper who had $20–30 million to spend, but is running again. He has the ability to do this. As a young member, Chris DeLuzio in Western Pennsylvania. So there's a way to do this in your district and in your state. Where it gets really complicated is because of how people get information. I mean, the Washington Post just laid off a third of their staff. So this is one of my big things is I have an initiative on the demise of local news. The news we get here in Contra Costa, I mean, people would complain against Dean Lesher, but he lived in Orinda. He lived here. He knew he had a commitment. There was a professional reporter in the front row of every city council and school board when there was something up there, right? I remember the person who was in the front row in Concord when I was there. His name was Larry Spears. He was a great journalist. He knew every relationship all five of us had. That's gone. There's nobody in the front row anymore unless there's something controversial happen. So how do we get information? Facebook, Instagram, it's not the same. So we have to rebuild professional journalism. This is what Jefferson wrote about when he was 33 years old, when he talked about the need, and Franklin, he was a printer. You have to have objective, knowing they're humans and they're going to not always be objective, in the front row watching what we do, and we don't have that. So that's one of our biggest challenges. There's a simple way to do this, couple things, and the tech pros won't like this. You make them liable for what goes on there. So why not just make them be licensed by the Federal Communications Commission and get a license, the platforms, just like CBS, ABC, all the radio stations have to do. We've been talking about this for years. And they are exempt from people suing them for what they're doing to kids right now. By Congress, it's called Section 230 of the Federal Communications Act. So if they would be more careful, and we have to balance First Amendment rights because you don't want to be censoring. You want people to be able to say what they want to say. But you still have to have a framework just like TV and radio stations have to do. And, you know, you still have very partisan views, but it's not like this Wild West that we currently have. So how you get information is really important. And we're in a real bad spot right now. And people, you know, I was on the Oversight Committee when Mueller came. I spent time with him. I spent time with Mr. Cohen. And I thought that was a tipping point where Americans would say enough. We can't have foreign governments affecting our decision-making like this. But of course, it's Americans too who are doing this, who are misleading us. It's always been that way. If you remember James Callender, the Finder of the Country, he was a leading pamphleteer who he'd side with Hamilton and then he'd side with Jefferson. So it's always been thus, so we know that. But we have new technology that's more sophisticated than anything humankind has ever been involved with, and there's got to be guardrails on that. And right now, because of that last slide I showed you, we can't get members to get out there and speak about it. And for the life of me, I'm sorry, my daughter-in-law says I have a character flaw that I gave her husband where I believe in the goodness of other human beings. And she said it in a way, if she's watching, I don't mean to, but she said it in a way that unfortunately we have to realize that, as Madison said in the Federalists, if people were angels, there'd be no need for government. So we have to be aware that we're all different, we're fail, isn't that brilliant, Madison writing that? But it's the truth. So all of these guardrails we don't have right now, and we have to get them. And there's a real effort by us to do it. But I'll tell you, I'm really frustrated by a lot of my colleagues because they're too afraid to take these people on and just say, you just have to be liable, for, just like other platforms have been, and it's worked in the benefit of the country. Mm-hmm. One last thing that Reagan got rid of, which is a real problem, there used to be a requirement in Federal Statute and Communications Act for equal time. It was good. So if you did something editorially that was too conservative, too liberal, you had to give 30 minutes or 50 minutes or 5 minutes to somebody. Reagan got rid of it, and that was really, because of the structure of how advertising is paid for, was a real underestimated detriment, in my view, to how we get information.
All right, and we have time for one more quick question. We have here from Elaine. It is apparent to me that the Supreme Court is in need of an overhaul. Has there been has there been any Has there been any solid discussion / planning in Congress about how to expand or reform the Supreme Court?
Yes, and it's all on our side. So term limits for the Supreme Court, having them have the same conflict of interests that the president and Congress has. I mean, Clarence Thomas I went to college with Clarence Thomas. He was a senior when I was a freshman. He was a lovely young man at that time. We spent most of our time playing basketball. But these conflicts of interest are outrageous. You can't be hanging around with people you're making decisions with the way they have and getting financial. So at the very least, you start with they have to have the same conflict of interest laws, and they can't be the judge of that. There's got to be a third party. And then I don't personally like term limits. The best is just having people know when it's time to go and the voters know when it's time to go and performance. But in this environment, there should be term limits, and it should be the makeup of the Supreme Court should be enlarged. I mean, started with 6, I believe. It's 9. We got 330 million people live in this country right now, very complex laws. This is part of the problem with the earlier question about how do we get actions by the courts faster. We have to change the federal court system so you still have due process, but they make decisions that are truly objective more quickly. And you can let the appeals process play out, but at least you go first do no harm. We're going to stop what you're doing right now because we think there's enough danger.
All right, thank you, Congressman, and thank you all so much for joining us today at Valley View Middle School and via live stream. I'm going to turn it back over to the Congressman for a few closing words.
See, you noticed how in the hour we were here, because I'm talking too much, how subtly she tried to direct me? We're going to have one last quick question, which they get trained on this. Well, I just want to thank you all. I'm sorry, I can be verbose when I get tired and motivated, but I hope this was helpful. It's really important. Meeting as human beings, we have to do this, folks, and it's okay to disagree. If there are people who would disagree with me or never vote against me, I had a woman years ago, God, lovely, I just remembered her name. She came to one of I do these mobile district office hours at libraries, and people just come in and talk to me. So she had a bunch of things she wanted to tell me. She was doing this a lot of the time. And about the third time we met with her, she came up to me and she said, you know, I don't like you. I'll never vote for you, but I've changed my mind. You're all right. I'm like, yes. So it's okay to disagree. We're all wrong sometimes. And that doesn't mean we sacrifice our principles, but we've got to listen to one another. And folks, for whatever the timing that we live in, these are really, really challenging times. In this country, imagine another incident like Minnesota anytime in the next week. And this is really dangerous times. So it's important for us to be engaged, but also remember that this country is an amazing example of humans governing themselves. There's never been anything at this scale like this, but that requires us to accept the fact that all of us have our own unique humanity, and we have to respect one another for that. And that doesn't mean you're going to agree with everybody. It just means you're going to listen. And everybody gets a voice. Not everybody gets to get elected. But that's the world we have. So I just really want to thank you. One of the things that keeps me going is these town halls. It makes me feel good to be, as a member of the House of Representatives, have an opportunity to come and talk to you and just listen, but also be able to express myself on a human level. So thank you for being here, and please stay engaged.